I'm really actually quite excited to be showing what this is all about. So, without further ado, I have put together a new package and it includes 5 individual one on one coaching sessions. I'm going to call this my Midlife Mastery Valuation Program. Now, I know that's a mouthful, but let's get to it. Let me explain to you what I am trying to accomplish and help you with. So, I had this great idea to do these deep dive calls and had a lot of fun with them. And after having done a few of these, I have finally kind of gotten it down to a bit of a science, right? And it all starts with the deep dive call and this midlife mastery valuation report. So let's take a look at what that is. For starters, I just want to tell you guys, I get it. I get that designing a life that you dream of, it's far-fetched. It's hard to think about it, especially when you've likely been holding some sort of deep dark secret for a while in your midlife that you don't really like your life. You might not hate it. I've definitely had some of you come through my program where you're like, learn to love my story, huh? I didn't really hate my story, so why do I need to learn to love it? And then others, that were fully on board with that. But I think that for those of you that just felt meh or stuck or like there should be more, but I don't really know where to go, this is going to be life altering for you. So, one of the pieces of feedback that I continually would get during all of my group coaching cohorts was how valuable it was for us to meet and for you to share personally about your stories and then for me to banter back and forth. In fact, I think most of you told me that you went back and watched videos more often because of the ad hoc stuff that I was talking about than anything else, right? And it made sense to me. I've put together all of these courses, the workbooks, all the things that you guys know because you've been through my programs. And, that stuff's there and it lives there and you can go back to it. But what you can't go back to is me, and you can't really dig into what's causing problems. Well, here's the thing. I know that some of these statistics are happening to you. You're experiencing divorce at higher rates. You're reporting way higher rates of anxiety and depression, way higher than your male peers. And you also are in some form of perimenopause, menopause, blah, 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 hormone crazy all at one time in the juncture of our lives where the most things are changing. So we are, finding in the workplace that younger generations are coming in, things are getting changed. We might not be being valued in the same way that we used to in our homes. We may have made it a point not to make a ruckus. We may be the people pleaser that I'm not going to create conflict. I'll just do the stuff. I'm not going to ask for help. I'm going to be the good mom. And we even got some pride out of it, right? Like we like being the good spouse, the good parent, all of those things. But now it's wearing on us. And if our kids are aging out, it also is occurring to us, what the hell am I going to do? Because like my whole life ended up wrapped around that. Even if I was working outside the home or doing other things, kids came first, right? And our marriages, our relationships, they look way different as we age. And if we haven't been putting time and energy into them, they look not so great at this stage. So knowing all of these things, I know that what you need from the Learn to Love Your Story program is much more specific to you than it is to the 5 areas. Now, the 5 skill areas, absolutely necessities, right? You all know that. You all believe that because you've been in my programs. And what I wanted to put together was a way to get a handle on where people are at in each of those need areas in combination with what your ideal goal is and what you think the barriers are between you and getting to that goal, right? So it's those 3 parts. It's where are you at in your acquisition and use of the 5 skill areas that you've learned about in learntoloveyourstory.com. Where are you as far as what your dream is? Dream, but no fear, no holding back. What would life look like if you were living your dream life? And what are those barriers that seem to be getting in between? And then I will help you couple where your skill levels are at, your strengths and your vulnerabilities with what these barriers are to help you address them directly. So essentially, it's like coming up with all of that ad hoc stuff really quickly and focused, and with 5 one-on-one sessions, right? So we will walk through this together so you can see what the report all entails. But what I will have you do, if you so choose, is at least sign up for the deep dive call, our call with me. So it's basically an hour one-on-one coaching session with a report that goes with it that you walk away with. This is really valuable, you guys. Like, in my private practice, I would be charging in the neighborhood of $500 for this much work. So that just puts it into perspective for you. I'm going to walk you through what this valuation report is all about. So we start with that midlife mastery really is about me trying to help you get out of your own way. I want you to live your dream life, right? I really want you to be able to find what you want in life and be able to zero in on it, block out the other stuff, the old habits of who you are, the old, self-defeating behaviors, any of those things, block them out. They can be rumble strips on your highway for sure, right? Because they tell us that we're going off road, but I want you to stay on that straight and narrow. So evaluation report is really about where are your strengths and weaknesses in the 5 areas in particular. Where are you at? Now, there are also questions embedded in the survey that I give you that tell me a little bit about where you're at in the level of midlife transition, midlife discomfort, midlife crisis on the other end. And so there are some questions that are not necessarily related to the 5, but you'll notice as you're taking the survey that it really is coming back to those 5 areas. So we want to gain a deeper understanding of where you're at to start with, because that's your skills, right? Like, let's start with where you are. Let's start with your skills. Then I want to help you to start to see, like, what are my goals and aspirations? Like, what is that dream life? Like, really, if I pulled everything out, what do I wish that life would be in 5 years, in 10 years, right? And what I want you to really think about is to, I will have you talk about your barriers as well. I want you to pull those away, right? So don't tell me, I want financial freedom. That's too abstract. So I'm going to ask you to really be detailed, right? Tell me what that means to you. Well, it means I won't work a lot, maybe 20 hours a week tops, but still live the same lifestyle that I'm living right now. Like, that would be my ideal. Okay. And I'm not going to help you make money, and I'm not going to help you with a business plan. Like, that's not what I'm going to do. But what I am going to do is I'm going to help you tackle what are the next things that you say. Well, but I have to work to pay the bills, but I've been at this job for this long and I'm just about to get into a pension. Well, the kids are still living at home. Sometimes they come back to couch surf and I need a little extra money around. I'm going to help you see what are the places where your skill sets are not helping you compensate for those barriers for yourself. I mean, hey, sometimes you'll come to the end of this and say, financial freedom, actually, I'm going to change my rules around what financial freedom looks like. But you might also change your rules, bucking that system on what it is that these barriers look like to you. Maybe they're not so much barriers. Maybe they were self-inflicted. Maybe they don't have to be barriers. So these are the kinds of things that we'll be looking at and that I'll be questioning you about. And then the survey is really going to help you see where those strengths and vulnerabilities are in self-awareness, self-compassion, self-care, what I call self-evaluation. But what we're looking at there is like how do you feel about being able to step into empowered decision-making and bucking the system? And then your growth mindset, right? Which eventually is what all of those things kind of roll into so that you can keep rinse repeating and growing throughout the rest of your life. And the final step in that process then is the meeting. So I have you, sign up for a time, you go online, you fill out an essay, and then I'll send you a survey with the rest of those questions. And then the final step of this is I want you to sit down with me and I'll go through those results. So some of these assessment tools are modifications of psychological assessment tools that people that don't have a doctorate are not trained to do. So it's really valuable information, and I'm pulling it together because I think that it really will help you to address specifically what it is that you need to get out of your own way and really live this life that you want to have. This is what we'll be looking at, as I've said. So it's the self-awareness, self-compassion, self-empowerment, self-care, and growth mindset. And what I'll be able to tell you is within this context, how high or low are you in each of these? Now, right at the end of today's video, I have a video of one of your peers that volunteered to do one of these with me and permitted that I could do a little recording. It's mostly the recording of me talking about what her results were, but it'll give you an idea of what this picture will look like when we sit down for that meeting and go through these 5 areas. Then I'm going to pick out some of the highlights. So highlights can be things like, I think that this is an area of vulnerability right here, that you're not engaging in the right amount of self-care. So you're kind of burning your wick at both ends, right? But on the other hand, one of the other highlights I saw was that your sense of self-determination, your ability to kind of shift, pivot, create new rules for yourself is like really one of your strengths. So could we help you to counterbalance those two? I want you to be able to make all of those pivots, but you're going to need the energy level to do it. And then I'll get even more specific, like here's the kinds of things that I think that you should be doing to build up your energy level. The kind of thing that you're doing when you're saying, hey, I got to buck the system, that's creative work. That's like I'm having to create a new rule for myself and then go live my life by it, right? You need a little dopamine, you need a little serotonin. So we're going to zoom in on this self-care piece. And I'm going to tell you, here are some things that I think you need to do to lift your dopamine levels. And here are some things I need you to do to lift your serotonin levels. Very specific, very much to just what your barrier is. Nobody else's, right? Really cool stuff. So these are the highlights. Some of them might be considered lowlights, but I'm going to call them all highlights because what it is it's the stuff that kind of rose to the top when I was looking through your survey, and the scores are telling me a story about what's working and not working in your life. And then we'll get into it, discuss it a little bit further so I have some more detail around it, and then I can give you some stronger feedback. The next steps is also kind of an added step where I give you a little extra in the suggestion box. So while in the highlights, I also will tell you some ways that you can start to counterbalance, right? Like the self-care specifically. The next steps is like another step above that. So this is where I, after I'm able to kind of see the story and the data points, I also will come up with some ideas for ways in general before we sit down and talk, because you'll have this report to look at as we're talking, ways in general that I think that you can help to like offset vulnerabilities with your strengths. So taking those strengths and offsetting the places where you're not as strong. And like if you're somebody who's really self-aware, right, really good at seeing what you're doing that participates in your own suffering, oh my God, here I go again. I'm watching myself do it. I know better. But on this side, you have really difficult time with self-kindness, that self-compassion piece, where we know that that combination is not great, right? Because if we start getting self-critical, we're likely to double down and start doing the old behavior even harder, even more, right? So self-awareness without self-compassion is not a great combo. Compassionate self-awareness is what we're trying to seek out. So I'll be in my next step section giving you some ideas of, so how would you marry that up? If I see that you have high self-awareness, low self-care, or self-compassion, how do I help you to bridge those gaps? And what does this report look like? Well, let me help you with that. So the midlife mastery evaluation report looks like this, right? We just walked through all of these parts. So a lot of this will seem familiar, but it starts with you, right? I have your name all the way through it. I do have a little introduction here. Of course, I always have a hello, nice to meet you. More information in detail about some of those statistics that we talked about. going through what the valuation report is going to tell you, all that stuff we had already talked about. Here's where the meat of it starts to happen. So I go through each of these areas and I'm going to give you your results. So if your results show moderate levels in self-awareness and then low levels in self-compassion, just like that example I just gave you, well, this is probably going to be a combination that you're going to see us work on through the highlights and the next steps. Self-empowerment, right? If you have answered in such a way that you're answering like you're more in the end towards really dissatisfied in midlife, maybe heading towards that midlife crisis like spectrum, then we'll have a conversation about what were the questions, like specifically what were the questions that you endorsed? What are my thoughts? Does that fit in with this story that we're already starting to see up here? And then again, self-care and growth mindset, like where are you at with those? Self-care is broken down into several different sections, just like we taught in the Learn to Love Your Story personal development program. So I'll talk about like, are you doing better in the physical self-care than you are in emotional or spiritual? Should we be offsetting it? So it can get pretty detailed even in these sections. And growth mindset, of course, is just kind of a check-in on are you getting in your own way? Are you getting stuck with some fixed ideas about how things should be? So that's what that page looks like. This is what the highlight page looks like. It'll give you the highlight. It'll give you some suggestions that I have, and we'll talk those through more in depth when I start to meet with you in the meeting. And then your next steps, which again are just some extras, right? So I'll enforce maybe some of the concepts of places where I saw vulnerabilities earlier, but also kind of throw some sidearms at you. I mean, we don't really talk about socializing in community except for the Learn to Love Your Story community, but I'll talk to you in depth about why I think something like more social time could be good, or acceptance and letting go. These are concepts I don't necessarily pick apart and teach specifically in the Learn to Love Your Story program, but these were the kinds of things that would be coming up ad hoc when we were talking. And so I want to make sure that I give you some of these little tidbits as well. Let's just take a little bit of time right now, and you can watch some of the highlights from the video of the feedback session that I had with one of your peers, Heather. Now, she was so gracious to let us watch this together, but I think that actually watching in action how some of my feedback will go with you in the individual session will help you know if this is something that you want to dive into. Now, remember, this is before you would be doing the 5 one-on-one sessions. So let's take a look. Let me look at your results with you because they were interesting. The self-awareness is in a moderate range. So always room, to keep evolving in our self-awareness level. But there wasn't anything that, said you didn't have the skill sets. It's, I think, probably getting pulled away by some of these other things that were in the results. Your self-compassion is really low. And what I don't have broken out, but there are 2 questions per a category. So some is self-kindness, some is like, putting it in the perspective of my common humanity, those things that we learned in the group coaching. And I can give you a better even breakdown from there where it is. But from the questions I was looking at, it seems to me like you're low in self-kindness, and you're high in mindfulness, which is a bad combination, as I've talked about.
I am
right?
high and mindful. Okay.
Yeah. So you're mindful of things, but then you're critiquing, you're judgy about it.
Sure.
And that's the combination that kind of sinks us. And beckons us towards what we think is safe. But remember, what safe keeps us stuck, because what's safe is really what's familiar, and what's familiar is an old version that's not going to get us to the new place, right? It goes up. So you have great self-awareness. Really, honestly, it's a little bit above average, but average is great for an American. Honestly, most of us are well below what I want us to be at. So you're in a great place, and you're seeing the things that you need to see, but it's hard to keep looking at those things and be frustrated that no change is happening, and be critical of yourself that no change is happening. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. You nailed it.
Yeah. So that's something that I'm seeing in the data that's definitely, we need to pick. Self-care score tells me you are very much invested in taking care of yourself as a way to do this work. So I don't need to do any convincing for you to know that, but we might want to zone in on the kinds of self-care that are going to be more useful for the stuff that you're describing. The struggle with finding meaning in your life and feeling confident were a couple of the ones that I was like, oh, well, that makes sense then, because if you're self-critical, you're not going to be as confident and you're going to have more of a struggle. So I think that the story now is making sense to me, that you are more vulnerable, but you're more vulnerable hinging on this linchpin of the self-kindness piece, the inability to put self-compassion into action. You understand self-compassion, great, because that's an important piece of it too. But I can't, knowing it doesn't put it into action in our life. Totally. So it doesn't seem like you're not doing your self-care. And that's great, because that'll be an asset of yours. So this is one of your very biggest strengths. You have really healthy self-awareness. That's good too. That's one of the big strengths. But the biggest strength, I would say, is your dedication to your own self-care and your acknowledgement that it's a necessary thing for yourself. Knowing that, we use that then, and we have to formulate what are going to be the self-care things that facilitate self-kindness, that facilitate kind of building in and creating new neurology that makes you feel so kind towards yourself every time the old judgy voice shows up. So last but certainly not least is in your mindset is on the low moderate side. So it's not quite low, it's low moderate, but I'd like to see it come up a bit. So some of the ones that I highlighted were, let's see. You find it stressful and you avoid new things. So we've been talking about that already. That just came up organically. And you have a hard time getting feedback from others. So creative talent or creative hobbies, go back to, if we anchor this to your big strength, which is self-care, if you create something you've never done, so you start doing the, paintings or whatever you want to do, like you pick up a new thing completely and give it a go, it's building that kind of neurology in your brain. And I'd also even be more specific than that. I would say you want to have things that have beginning, middle, and end. It seems silly. It seems like such a small thing, but these are the kinds of things that are like compound interest by 0.5%. It's not big today and tomorrow and in a week, but it's really big over the course of a year. And it's really big over the course of a lifetime. So if you always are looking in your life for another creative thing to be picking up, you might, drop some hobbies and pick up new ones as you go. You're going to facilitate the kinds of neural networks that look at the world that way, which means when you're problem solving, even in your life, and you're like, I don't like this, I'm craving social engagement, I'm not getting it from my current social group. The true, deficit here is I need a new social group. But I have literally no creativity around how to figure that out. Right. Well, if you've been doing these kinds of self-care things, your brain operates a little bit differently and it looks for things a little bit differently. If you're a Sudoku junkie, you're looking at it like a puzzle, right? Like, well, then how do I move things around to design it that way? Perfect. So that's my feedback for you.
Well, and I so appreciate
for doing this. My thought with this is it gives people more of a one-on-one experience with me. And I'm opening up individual coaching. So I thought it was like a way to kind of introduce you to all the concepts that I have. So if you want to, you can do the courses. If you want to, you can join a group coaching group, or you could do one-on-one with me and we can do it much more specifically to your specific situation.
So continue one-on-ones, like that is possible. Okay. Yep. Your classes have been so life-changing for me. I so appreciate like 2 years ago, I think when you started this, I was never self-aware. Like I would dissociate it, like the gruesome twosome, like you were talking about. Yeah. It's like, she knows me,
well, that's good, because I'm glad that it's resonating for people, because I do know this is happening. I've just done too much therapy to believe that this isn't happening to a ton of us. It's happening to a lot of us. So thanks, you guys. I'm really excited about this opportunity, and I really hope that some of you take me up on it, because it is definitely going to show you some really great stuff. Probably is, some of it won't be surprising. It'll be things that you depending on what program you went through with me, but this is really going to give you more individual feedback. And then if you want, we can talk about what the 5 individual session package looks like, and how I am envisioning walking you through even more strength building, right, of those different skills areas based on what we talk about. So be sure to head over to learntoloveyourstory.com, go to How to Work with Dr. Natalie. You can click there on, actually, I think it's just even you fill it out, your name, your email address, and sign up for a time. And once you do that, it'll take you to the first part, which is just the essays telling me kind of what your dreams are, what you think your barriers are, walking through that. Remember, more detail, better off, because it'll give me more information before I start to do the report. After I get that essay from you, or, the information that you filled out, I'll send you a survey that has about 60 questions, I think, in it. It doesn't take too long. I'll have you pop through that. And make sure that you're signing up for your appointment at least a few days later from doing those surveys, because otherwise I can't really get the report together. I might reach out to you and see if we can push it back a little bit, just so that I have that report in hand for you. Well, I hope that all of that put together really has you thinking about whether or not you want to do this or not, because this, my friends, is probably going to be one of my favorite programs so far. I've loved all layers to Learn to Love Your Story, but I've always been trying to angle at helping people really specifically. And the group coaching is a huge piece of that, because you're helping one another and you're sharing your own stories, and that integrates with the skill sets that you're building. But I think this is really the next level. And so for those of you who have been with me for the long haul since 2020, when I got all started with this, I just want to invite you to join me and have at least that feedback session, right? The deep dive call, do the surveys, and have that feedback section with me, so that you can have this information that's a little bit more applicable to you yourself. And if you're interested, we can talk about what the 5 one-on-one sessions would look like, and then over what kind of a time frame we would be doing those in. All right, everyone, I am so excited to get started on this, and I hope to see you in a deep dive call.